Something terrible happened on the Tennessee River, especially to two people who never expected to see anything like it. They saw a huge creature lying on the bank, 16 meters long and emitting a terrible stench. The situation quickly escalated and the shocking news reached every media outlet in the city. The planet is drowning. It's a drastic statement, but it increasingly seems like a fact, and the air we breathe is filled with invisible poisons. The water is polluted with waste, and the soil we walk on is becoming dry and barren. It may not seem important, but for the creatures that live under the sea, it's catastrophic. The rise in global temperatures has disrupted the seasons, the shape, and the balance that governs our world. This has led to the desynchronization of reproduction, migration, and flowering of many species. Birds migrate too early or too late, insects disappear before fulfilling their ecological role, and forests wither under harsh skies. Some species, however, are forced to flee their habitats, desperately seeking refuge in lands they should never have entered, becoming invaders and altering ecosystems unprepared to receive them, which could lead to their death. Waters that were once crystal clear in some areas are no longer so. It's easier to dump waste at sea because it's cheaper. But at what cost? And I suppose the question is nobody doing anything about it? Well, clearly, yes. There are anti-pollution groups, but also art itself. There's a group called the Captain Boomer Collective, which aims to raise awareness of the damage. Their creations, such as the Skargt piece, are some of their most powerful works because of their radical nature. The piece takes the viewer on a terrifying descent into a 400-metre pit that directly represents how humanity is sinking further into hell. But it's just a simple piece of art, simple messages, simple campaigns. What is really out there in the world? Will there be any change? Or are these attempts really making a difference? Well, whatever it is, it's just small efforts, small things. Maybe we're already seeing the damage on our shores like the Thames in Greenwich, London, where we may be witnessing a chilling case. Nothing like this had happened since 2006, but unlike that peaceful event, this one was different because of one detail. The Thames is one of England's most iconic rivers, its shape stretching across the countryside and the city of London, serving as a lifeline for local wildlife and, of course, for the towns and cities along its banks, helping them to develop. But on this particular afternoon, the sky was grey over the river as a couple walked along the banks enjoying the fresh air. A couple who usually took this route at weekends as a sort of break from their work routine, allowing them to connect with nature. The man was an amateur photographer, capturing the beauty of the landscape with his camera, sometimes venturing into dangerous places to capture his art. Meanwhile, she was a marine biologist who often stopped to observe the local fauna, but on this day, something very different from what they were used to was about to happen. As they walked through the beautiful place, something disturbing caught their attention, something that made them both quite uneasy. A strange dark shadow stretched across the beach. It looked like a huge rock, but there were no rocks in that area, and they both knew it. As they approached the spot, the shape became clearer, and what they found there was a whale. Its damp skin shimmered in the faint sunlight, and its motionless body was unsettling, especially considering that the Thames, although rich in biodiversity, is rarely home to creatures of this size. In recent years, more than 160 species of fish have been recorded in its waters, including plaice, perch, and European eel, where huge efforts have been made to restore species. There have even been sightings of species such as seals and dolphins, and even surprising species such as dogfish, conger eels, pipefish, and seahorses. But a whale is something very rare. The only comparable event was in January 2006, when a North Atlantic minke whale was spotted swimming in the Thames, much to the amazement of the scientific community, as these whales usually live in deep water, at least 800 meters deep, and don't usually venture into a river like this. And she knew exactly what it meant, and of course she expressed her concern to her partner. The questions raised by the situation were, how did it get there? Was it alive? Without wasting any more time, the woman took out her mobile phone and called the authorities to come as soon as possible. The authorities instructed her to wait in an accessible area while her partner, unable to resist the urge to learn more and add to his photographic record, ventured a little closer. The local authorities were clearly confused by the news, as there had been no report of a whale on the banks of the Thames. After receiving the distress call, they began a verification process using radar and river monitoring systems, but found no evidence that a whale had recently arrived in the area. With this lack of record, there was some skepticism that the call was legitimate and that it was probably just a hoax. However, what largely dispelled this theory was that the person who made the report was no ordinary witness. She worked as a biologist, which gave her credibility and detailed knowledge of marine life. This forced the authorities to take the situation more seriously. In addition, her description and the facts she gave matched their own findings, as she even knew when the whale had last been seen and mentioned the possibility that it was in a state of decomposition. With all these arguments, it was impossible for her to lie unless she wanted to ruin her entire credibility and job, so they took her seriously and got to work. Due to the significant risk involved, they decided to contact a marine biology expert specializing in cetaceans to assess the situation. His response to the call was that he would come as soon as possible, but it would obviously take some time as he was not close to the area. His request was to organize a response team. With all this in mind, the rescue team agreed on a meeting point with the woman, and together they traveled to where the whale had been sighted. Of course, along the way, the expert explained everything there was to know, from the need to keep a safe distance to the dangers associated with the decomposition of a whale. The accumulation of internal gases resulting from the decomposition process could turn the whale into a latent biological bomb. And his fears were not unfounded, as similar cases had occurred in different parts of the world in previous years, such as in the Faroe Islands, where hunted whales exploded during decomposition, and in Taiwan in 2004, when a 60-ton whale burst during transport, scattering organic remains across an entire avenue. As they approached, the woman noticed something unusual. Her husband was not in the area. Obviously concerned, she decided to call him to see if he had left or something. When she called him, he answered, and she asked worriedly, "Where are you?" He replied very casually, "Inside the whale." The obvious question was, how did he get in, or so she told him, not counting the hysterical and aggressive tone. The man replied that he had gone in through the mouth and had only gone in for a few seconds because he was curious to take photographs of the inside of the whale when he found it dead. This information clearly confirmed that the creature had died. The whale expert asked him to describe the odor before he even attempted to leave, and the young man obviously complied, describing a bit over the phone that the odor surrounding him was like a sulfurous, choking stench composed of methane, hydrogen sulfide, and ammonia. Or at least, that's how the expert interpreted it. The young man simply described it as a sickening smell, like a mixture of rotten eggs. All of this led the expert to draw quick conclusions and instruct him to stay still, advising that it would be better to let the rescue team extract him with extreme caution. One false move, combined with the buildup of methane gas, could spell disaster. The whale might not explode from the outside, but with a person inside, the situation was different. With great urgency, the expert ordered that any attempt to exit prematurely be stopped and that the rescue team act with extreme care, but as quickly as possible. The expert would join the team on arrival, as he had already been given access to the helicopter, while the vehicles to remove the whale were on their way. Under the expert's guidance, the rescue team began the painstaking process of extracting the young man trapped inside the whale. This process required a high level of professionalism, so they first had to organize everything to avoid any inappropriate presence in the area. Under the expert's guidance, they identified the area and cordoned it off with some security tape. By this time, people were beginning to move through the area. While one group worked on securing the perimeter, Others began to approach to analyze the level of swelling, as this would determine how risky the situation was. The body was indeed somewhat swollen, but not excessively. Just enough, the expert said, which seemed like a strange coincidence, but it didn't matter for now. What he did ask was that an emergency protocol be put in place to prevent further swelling. He then suggested making a number of strategic incisions in the whale's abdomen, as the first opening released a significant amount of putrid gas, with a strong smell but not unbearable. It was tolerable for humans. The masked rescuers proceeded cautiously, allowing the internal pressure to release slowly without compromising the structural integrity of the body, knowing that things would stabilize once the smell had subsided. Once it was confirmed that the whale was stabilized, they proceeded to clear an exit route for the young man. Using specialized blades, the experts carefully removed sections of dead tissue, and after what seemed like an eternity, the rescuers successfully extracted the young man from his organic prison. The young man was relaxed, but his expression changed. Being inside this creature wasn't as frightening as the anger of his partner, who approached, relieved but upset, and immediately scolded him. The young man, still exhilarated by the experience, proudly showed off the photos he had taken from inside the whale. The expert arrived by helicopter a short time later and landed to find the team looking more relaxed. He told them that the vehicles to remove the mammal would be arriving soon, but he was also a little upset by the young man's actions. He immediately began to scold him for his recklessness. Before the expert could start his presentation, the woman asked him to stop and check the photos because they seemed strange to her. Not being an expert, she didn't know if it was just her. At first, everything seemed to be in order, a jumble of decomposing organs, tissues perforated by rescue cuts. But something didn't add up. There were slight differences in texture, in the structure of certain organs. They looked odd, and the details, though imperceptible to the untrained eye, didn't go unnoticed by a marine biology expert. As the expert analysed the images with growing unease, he asked the rescuers to investigate further when they heard something. The sound of heavy engines interrupted the scene as several trucks, accompanied by a group of people, approached. The expert sighed with relief, assuming it was the team he had asked to remove the whale's body. But as they approached, he realised they weren't authorities or scientists. It was another group. The leader, Steen Doggen, got out of the car. He was the brains behind the Captain Boomer Collective, smiling cheerfully but also confused. Doggen surveyed the scene with curiosity before asking calmly and authoritatively, "What are you doing here?" The expert approached, explained the situation, and asked who he was. Doggen introduced himself as the person responsible for the whale being there. What they were seeing was an art installation, a hyper-realistic representation created to provoke a reaction in society. But he hadn't expected experts to arrive on the scene. They were just trying to create a surprise. The expert understood everything, and his doubts were dispelled. The exact amount of gases in the body and the confusing internal parts clearly indicated that they were dealing with a very well-made fake. This made him a little angry, and the leader of the group apologized, but also mentioned that they had been given permission to come to the site and install it. What the expert did was congratulate them on how detailed it was and explain his training, as it was a meticulous process. Using molds of real sperm whales to ensure the authenticity of its appearance, they worked with great care to replicate every fold in the skin, every scar, and every distinctive mark. The internal structure was also designed with precision, but without the real biological components that would allow decomposition to follow its natural course. To enhance the realism of the installation, the sculpture was left on the beach overnight, accompanied by fake blood and substances that mimicked the smell of a decomposing corpse. Of course, they had planned to arrive early to organize the area to make it look like an investigation, but they hadn't expected the experts to arrive so early when all this was happening, and it was barely 7 a.m. However, they had already done that part. The leader apologized for not thinking about it and organizing it beforehand, as the expert had to travel a long way to get there quickly, and the group agreed to pay the travel expenses. People began to gather at the site. Later, some authorities covered the case, and it all ended up as publicity for the 2013 International Festival of Greenwich and Docklands. Subsequently, the group carried out more of these artistic proposals in other places: Valencia, Spain, Scheveningen, Holland, Oostende, Belgium, and Warsaw, Poland. Since then, it has served as a way to highlight current environmental issues and send a message that we need to change our practices. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button.